Okay. Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name's Amanda. I'm on the planning staff here for the city. We're going to go ahead and begin our scoping meeting for this is for the 1450 Artesia Boulevard Specific Plan Project. I'm going to bring up Nicole Cobley from DUDEC, our environmental consultants for the city on the project.
Good evening. Thanks for coming, and I'm so glad that we can provide this presentation to you guys to provide an overview about what the California Environmental Quality Act is and the environmental review process that we're initiating and going to be undertaking, as well as provide an overview of the proposed project. So I'm going to give you kind of an overview of what this evening will entail, and then I'll turn it over to Amanda to discuss or provide details about the proposed project, and then we'll wrap up the meeting, then I'll go ahead and talk about CEQA and what that is, what we're proposing to study, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, the members of the public. This is your community, and we want to make sure that the environmental document that we prepare is reflective of what you want to see and what you want evaluated, because this is your community. So tonight we're going to go over what the purpose of a scoping meeting is, what is the California Environmental Quality Act and its purpose, what's required under CEQA, the process that we're going to follow, and the notice of preparation that was circulated that dictates that we're going to be preparing an environmental impact report, what we're proposing currently to study in the environmental document that will be prepared. And then, like I said, we'll turn it over to you for public comment. Let's see, next slide. Again, we're going to talk about the purpose of the scoping meeting. The purpose of the meeting is to, thanks, sorry.
Arrows, yes.
Is to present an overview of the project so that you're aware of what is being proposed on the project site, which in this case is 1450 Artesia Boulevard. And then provide or receive input from the public and interested agencies on the environmental issues that you'd like to see studied. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda to talk about the proposed project.
Okay. So I'm just going to switch over. Okay. So I'm going to provide, so again, good evening. Again, my name is Amanda. I'm the project planner for the city. And as just, Nicole mentioned, I'm going to give a short presentation involving a description of the proposed project and what entitlements the applicant is requesting from the city. Okay. So the city has received an application to establish the 1450 Artesia Boulevard specific plan project to allow for development within a 6.3 acre site. As described, as the title project describes, the property is located at 1450 Artesia Boulevard. It's located on the southwest corner of Normandy Avenue and Artesia Boulevard, and was once part of the recently rescinded Artesia Corridor specific plan area of the city. The project area consists of a total of 6 parcels that currently contain some industrial areas, open paved areas, as well along Artesia Boulevard, and one residential dwelling unit behind the industrial properties adjacent to the Dominguez Channel. The specific plan area will include the one residential property in the southwest corner. However, as we'll get into it further, it is not part of the project's proposed development footprint. So here's some street photos to show the current existing structures on the site. Again, the site currently contains some industrial buildings included for, I believe, the U-Haul business located to the west side of the property. The northwest or northeast area is currently a vacant site known as the Gardena Sums, and we'll get further into the details of the location there. The site shows further the existing site along Artesia Boulevard, and this photo here shows the existing conditions of the project site along Normandy Avenue. And the site shows across the Dominguez Channel, which is located south of the project site. Okay, so to move into what's being proposed, so again, the city's received an application for a new development project located on the site. The project would include the construction of a new industrial building of approximately 268,000 square feet. With approximate height of 75 feet. The building is being proposed to include 3 levels for self-storage facilities that would include 1,480 new storage units. Additionally, there is approximately 72,000 square feet that would be dedicated for warehouse use, including for 10 loading dock doors. As well, there will, again, within the building would be approximately 10,000 square feet utilized for office and retail use. Other improvements involved in the project, besides the construction of the new building, includes the new perimeter fencing, on-site and off-site landscaping, new lighting throughout the site, and improvements to the exterior sidewalks abutting the project area. Lastly, I do want to note, again, as mentioned, the northeastern section of the property contains parcels are known as the Gardena Sumps. This area is a contaminated with oil sludge, which is a contamination from 3 sumps located on the project site. In June of 2022, the Department of Toxic Substances Control approved a remedial action plan, or RAP, for the Gardena Sumps on the 2 properties. And the RAP will, this RAP provide the Department of Toxic Substance Control will help to protect the human health and the environmental area and make the project site available for use and occupancy for its intended, in commercial and industrial building. It should be noted, though, the site's under this RAP under the contamination for remedial action is not located within the project footprint. So here's a site plan that shows the proposal for the new industrial building within the 6.3 acres lot. While the specific plan area would include, again, 1 existing residential property in the southwest corner, it's noted that it is not part of the project's current development footprint and would remain, as a legal non-conforming use. However, it is being included in the specific plan that's being proposed for the general area. As well, there is another area within the site that is being proposed for other uses besides the proposed, as mentioned, the industrial building. Location of the proposed parking lot area is being dedicated for use of city events. But to provide some information in regards to the site, I'll just go ahead and move back. So vehicle access will be provided via the 2 driveway aisles along the northwest corner of the site. It will also include approximately 124 parking stalls, and again 10 loading docks located along the east southern end of the building. All right, and then, so I just wanted to provide some further renderings or provide them in bigger view so all can see. But again, these are renderings again provided by the applicant. This is the building on the eastern side, so along Normandy, if you're facing the building. This is along the corner, along Artesia and Normandy. This would be the site of the new development. And this is a view of the proposed structure as seen from Artesia Boulevard. So now I want to explain what the requests are that the applicants are seeking from the city. So first, the request includes, again, what we're calling the 1450 Artesia Boulevard Specific Plan. The specific plan would be adopted to establish new development standards for the project area, that it would include things along the lines of building height, density, parking standards, landscape requirements, and other development standards throughout the project site. The applicant will also be requesting for a zone text amendment to establish these the specific plan requirements within the city's zoning code. A development agreement is being proposed in conjunction with the proposed project as well. A site plan review is part of the project to ensure that the project and the physical design are consistent with these, the newly established specific plan and the city's overall general plan. A lot merger is part of the proposal to consolidate the 5 parcels where the proposed structure is being proposed for construction. And as well, why we're here tonight as part of the project is an environmental impact report pursuant through, again, the California Environmental Quality Act, along with the environmental impact report would include a mitigation and monitoring and reporting program, as well as making sure that the project meets the required CEQA findings. So at this point, I'll turn it back to Nicole to go over the process of CEQA. Yeah.
Okay, so what is CEQA? CEQA is the California Environmental Quality Act. It was enacted in 1970, I believe, 1970, and with the purpose of identifying, we'll go ahead, next slide, sorry, with the purposes of protecting the environment by identifying ways to avoid or reduce significant environmental impacts, and analyzing alternatives to a project that could also avoid or reduce impacts. We'll talk a little more about that, but by avoiding or reducing impacts, we're talking about things like mitigation measures. So requirements to use cleaner engines on construction equipment, those kinds of things, in order to reduce air quality impacts. The other purpose of CEQA is to inform and disclose to decision makers and the public what the environmental impacts might be of the project if it were to be approved. And then to disclose the reasons why the project would be approved even if significant and unavoidable impacts were to be identified. Next slide. So within CEQA, there are different roles that that entities play. The city of Gardena is the lead agency. So the applicant has requested to have a project considered for approval. So Gardena, as the lead agency, is responsible for the preparation of an environmental impact report or any CEQA compliant document. In this case, it's an environmental impact report that needs to be prepared and have an objective analysis. In this case, the city of Gardena has hired Dudek to prepare this document on their behalf. So we're independent and separate from the project applicant and doing an objective analysis of what the potential impacts might be, and then again identifying ways to mitigate or revise the project if needed in order to reduce any potentially significant impacts. Next slide. So what does CEQA require? CEQA requires the consideration of all project phases: planning, acquisition, the construction, and operations of all components of the project. It also requires an evaluation of the change in existing conditions. So we mark the existing conditions as the day that the notice of preparation went out for public review, which in this case was June 8th. So that is the start of the public review period, but also the baseline condition for what's we're going to compare the impacts to. So kind of it's the zero and what's the difference between what will be on the site eventually versus what's on there now. And then again, we need to identify mitigation measures to reduce potentially significant impacts and evaluate alternatives to the project. So CEQA requires that we evaluate at least the no project alternative, and then we'll working with the city, the applicant team, and understanding the project objectives and understanding what potential impacts might exist, we look at alternatives that could avoid or reduce potentially significant impacts. Next slide. CEQA also requires that we review potential impacts. Direct impacts caused directly by the project and indirect impacts that could happen off-site because of the project. Short-term and long-term impacts. Short-term would be things that would happen during construction, lane closures as equipment is loading onto the site. And long-term, how many vehicles, what's the traffic like in the longer term? What are the operational emissions from trucks visiting the 10 loading docks, those kinds of things. And then as well as cumulative impacts, what we do is we work with the city to identify other projects that are happening in the vicinity that collectively with this project could result in cumulative impacts or a larger range of impacts beyond just those immediately caused by the project. Growth-inducing impacts, and again, identifying unavoidable impacts. Next slide. So here's a flow chart that provides an overview of the CEQA, of the EIR process. There are other documents that can be prepared under CEQA, but this is a more comprehensive document with a longer time frame. So right now we are in the first box at the top, prepare and distribute notice of preparation. So as I mentioned, the notice of preparation was circulated on June 8th. We have, in this case, 32-day public comment period, or scoping period, where we are soliciting input from members of the public and agencies on what should be studied in the environmental impact report. We're having the scoping meeting, which is the first step in this process to engage the public and gain input. From there, using the preliminary results that we've found, as well as what we hear tonight, we will be preparing the draft environmental impact report. That process takes a few months, and then when the city feels comfortable with the analysis and conclusions in the draft document, it's circulated for a 45-day public review period. Right now, we're looking at that could be late third quarter this year, early fourth quarter this year, so in the latter part of this year, in the fall. And then we go ahead, or then that document circulated for 45 days. You'll see that there's another opportunity for public comment at that time. And then we prepare what's called the final environmental impact report, where we respond to all environmental comments received during that 45-day public review period. Whether they're from agencies or members of the public, we respond to all of them and make any modifications to the draft EIR that might be needed in response to those comments. And then that final EIR goes before the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council for consideration and understanding what the environmental impacts will be, again, to make an informed decision on whether or not they want the project to go through given the environmental impacts. And then upon completion of the approval process with City Council, we would then file what's called a notice of determination that starts the 30-day statute of limitations period for any challenges that might come forth for the project. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, the first step was preparing a notice of preparation. This has been prepared, was circulated on June 8th. It contains a brief description of the project, where it's located, and where documents can be found, including a link on the website to where you can review the document online. This was also sent to responsible agencies, so agencies like the Department of Toxic Substances Control, who's overseeing or just approved that remedial action plan, for the site, and so the cleanup of it, as Amanda mentioned, it's near a waterway, so the notice went to the U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife. So that is the window. It starts the window where we're soliciting input on what should be studied in the environmental impact report. And then that period closes July 10th. Next slide. So we also prepared what's called an initial study. It's a checklist where we look at 21 different environmental topics. And based on our preliminary read, these are the items that we propose to study in the environmental impact report. So they include air quality, both construction and operational air emissions, cultural resources, energy, geology and soils, including paleontological resources, greenhouse gas emissions, hazards and hazardous materials, especially given the site's past contamination history, hydrology and water quality, land use and planning, so consistency with plans for the city, noise, again, short-term construction noise and long-term operational noise, transportation, tribal cultural resources, and utilities and utilities and service systems. So that's what we propose to study, but if there's something that you feel is important that's not on this list that you'd like to see studied, this is where we're wanting you to. Sure. So transportation, there was a change in CEQA, in the legislation in CEQA, about 5 years ago, where we used to look at what's called level of service, and we looked at basically how big is the intersection and what happens if you add more cars to the intersection, and intersections got letter grades like A, that's an awesome intersection, all the way to F, which is a failing intersection. Basically, it meant you sat through the light cycle like 4 or 5 times, and it just got super frustrating. Well, in order to, for lots of reasons, but in order to get people off the road and incentivize using transit and other means of travel, bikes, walking, trains, and with the added bonus of improving air quality, the state adopted what's called vehicle miles traveled. And so every project is measured against kind of a baseline of the average person drives X number of miles on a given day. And would the project make people drive more than that average or less than that average? And so that's what we look at now with traffic, rather than is the intersection so congested that you have to sit through 5 light cycles. So that's a quick little overview about what vehicle miles traveled, or VMT, is. Okay, next slide. So, as I said, this is your turn now. We've said what we think needs to be studied, but we'd like to hear from you, the members of the public, the residents of this city, because this is your city and you're the experts. So we encourage you to comment tonight. If you don't feel comfortable commenting tonight, or if you do comment tonight and additional comments or thoughts come up, you're welcome to submit comments in writing via email to Amanda. Her contact information, I believe, is provided here. If not, we can get in touch with her. And so you have all the way through July 10th to go ahead and submit comments on what you'd like to see studied. So, again, I mentioned tonight's the opportunity to comment. So here's what I want to see studied. When the draft environmental impact report goes out for public review for that 45-day window, we'll have another meeting. There will be another opportunity. You get to review the document and say, I don't know. What do I think of what I said I wanted studied? Is it studied adequately? So that's an opportunity for you to come back and provide more comments. And then, as I said, in the final environmental impact report, we have to respond to all those comments. And then, again, opportunities to speak before the Planning Commission and the City Council. So with that, we will now go ahead and accept comments for those that wish to comment. And again, if you don't feel comfortable, or if you think of something after the fact tonight that you want to submit comments, here's Amanda's contact information, and this presentation will also be posted on the city's, or on YouTube and on the city's website for reference. So you can always go back and get her information from the site then. So thank you. And do you want me to facilitate this, or do you want to? Okay, great. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, sir. Go ahead, yeah. I'll just reiterate on the mic so it gets recorded.
So the remediation plan, will the city and the applicant be involved, or the applicant is responsible for the remediation plan?
Okay. So for the recording, the question was for the remedial action plan, the RAP that was already approved for a portion of the property, what is the city's involvement and or what is the applicant's involvement? We do have the applicant and the representative here, so I'm going to refer to them to answer this question.
Thank you, Amanda. Good evening, everyone. My name is Fernando Villa, and I serve as Land Use and Environmental Counsel for the applicant, Insight Property Group, and the ownership that it's created for owning and developing this property. So in answer to the question, the principal party that will be involved with cleaning up the site is a company called Atlantic Richfield Company. That's the responsible party that the California Department of Toxic Substance Control, as you heard Amanda mention earlier, designated as the responsible entity because DTSC determined that it was that energy company that had actually transported many of the chemicals that were found on the property. And DTSC has worked out a consent order with that entity to undertake that cleanup. And as Amanda mentioned, there was a remedial action plan that was approved in June of 2022 that was approved after that agency held a public community meeting where people commented on, they gave their input. That agency took into account those comments to finalize the order that says, okay, Atlantic Richfield Company, this is what your remedial action plan has to include. I can give you some real basic elements of the plan as we understand it. It's going to have what's called an engineered cap. It's a very well designed cap that has different elements to it. That will prevent any of the contaminants from coming out, exposing anyone to any contact at all, either on the property itself or off-site. There will also be what are called soil vapor probes that will measure any of the constituents of concern, and they principally are basically petroleum or oil hydrocarbons, along with what are called volatile or organic compounds. These are fairly volatile compounds that typically, for example, dry cleaning companies would use. They're known as like PCE, TC, and the like. And there are certain spots within the property that the agency told Atlantic Richfield Company, hey, these concentrations are a little high. We want you to remove them and take them off-site to a facility that's licensed to process and take care of those constituents. And they did that. They are going to do that for just very limited portions. There was a health risk assessment that the agency required Atlantic Richfield Company to undertake. And the purpose of that risk assessment was to make sure that if this plan that I just described to you is implemented, there will be no unreasonable risk to human health or the environment. And there's very, very specific requirements or what are called attainment goals that the responsible party has to show that this remedy will achieve. And based on that health risk assessment, the agency approved this particular plan. Our client, the Inside Property Group project proponent, will not implement that remedy per se because that's Atlantic Richfield Company's responsibility. However, our client will be obligated to do everything it can as the owner and operator of that property to ensure that that remedy is not interfered with, to honor the integrity of the systems. There will be certain what are called institutional controls the agency will impose on the property and on the operator and the owner of the property, which is Inside Property Group, that basically say you can't use this property for any sensitive uses like residential or daycare facilities or hospitals. It's perfectly fine for you to develop and operate the project that you heard Nicole and Amanda describe earlier, the warehouse facility, the self-storage units, the associated parking, even the community events that will take place in that part of the parking area that you saw Amanda highlight. All those uses are just fine because the cleanup standards that Atlantic Richfield Company is going to use will protect people with those kinds of exposures. But no sensitive uses are permitted. Neither the owner nor anybody else can drill below or otherwise tamper with the cap itself. That'll be underneath the parking structure, by the way. The building is not going over the cap. It's going to be outside of the footprint of the cap. There will be certain probes and monitoring wells that will be installed to monitor to make sure that the exposure levels are going to be safe. No one can touch those monitoring wells. We have to have protection around those monitoring wells to make sure that nothing happens to them. And the project will be designed around those features so that there's not going to be any interference with the remedy. And the other part of it, too, is the ownership has to provide Atlantic Richfield Company access to the property to make sure that that entity will properly maintain those systems. And then lastly, Atlantic Richfield Company is obligated periodically to report to DTSC that the contaminant levels are still safe. All those periodic reportings from those wells that I described show that they're below the levels that are safe for human health and the environment. That's done on a periodic basis so that DTSC can see for itself that Atlantic Richfield Company is properly implementing that remedy. And if there's ever a problem, for example, if there's any readings in those reports that show those safe levels have been exceeded, the agency will require Atlantic Richfield to clean it up. So there's not, just because the cap is going to be built, the probes are going to be put in place, and we're going to be operating this facility, does not mean that that's the end of the responsibility for the responsible party. The agency will monitor the implementation of the performance of that remedy for many years out to make sure it's safe for everyone. So I hope that explains the process and the remedy and who's responsible. And if you have any questions, please by all means ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. So were there any other questions or comments from any members of the public here tonight on the project, on the process? Okay. If not, again, my contact is up on the screen there as well. My card is at the back of the room. Feel free to take if you have any comments, if you'd like to be notified of the project going forward. Please let me know. We'll go ahead and send all notices out. The initial study that was prepared for the project, there's a copy in the back. If anybody, I'm not sure if I made enough, but if you would like a copy, just let us know. We can make you one. Again, all the information's on the city's website, the initial study, project plans. If anybody has a question, feel free to contact staff as well. But thank you for coming tonight. So thank you. Have a good day.